Someone, Scott, please stand by the witness stand, please. You swear affirm that the testimony you give in this case now and hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Please have your seat. Someone, will you please state your full name, spelling your last?
Corey Noel Scott. Last name is S-C-O-T-T.
And Your Honor, I realize that I just have Captain House on the phone here. I'm going to hang up.
All right.
Thank you. And what is your current rate, rank, and duty station?
Rate is Special Operator First Class in E6, and I'm stationed at Naval Special Warfare Basic Training Command.
Can you please explain for the members a little bit about your command history?
Command history, I was at BUDS in 2010. SQT, I went to North Carolina to JSOM TC, did the combat medic course, and then from there I did 3 platoons at SEAL Team 7, and then end of 2017 I was stationed at NSW VTC where I currently am.
And I want to break a couple of those things down. With regard to your time at SEAL Team 7, did you do any deployments there?
Yes, in 2013 I did a deployment to Afghanistan, and then the 2nd platoon I had to stay back at home. Then the 3rd platoon, 2017, I did a deployment to Iraq.
In that deployment to Afghanistan, did you see any combat?
A little bit.
And with regard to the medic training, can you explain that a little bit more for the members, what that training actually entails?
So, my words, the training that I received, it was becoming a master of the basics of everything you would need to know to save somebody's life with the tools you have in that first hour after an incident, and then prepare them to transport to a higher level of care.
How long was that training?
It was a 6-month course when I went through it.
And is there a part of that training, is there any refresher courses that you're required to take in order to keep your credentials up?
Yes, in order to keep my ATP card active, I have to go to the refresher every 2 years.
And at the time of your deployment in 2017, were your credentials up to date?
Yes, there were.
I want to shift gears now for just a moment. SO1 Scott, are you testifying under a grant of testimonial immunity today?
Yes.
When you gave your initial statements to NCIS, first in April of 2018 and then again in October of 2018, at that point had you received a grant of testimonial immunity?
No, I had not.
Does your grant of testimonial immunity allow you to lie here on the stand?
No, it does not.
Do you know the accused in this case, Chief Gallagher?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know the accused?
I did a platoon with him. The last platoon I did at SEAL Team 7.
Okay. And when did you first come to know him?
When he checked in after he returned from his previous deployment, it would have been probably the fall of 2015.
And what was your impression of Chief Gallagher when you first met him?
He was to the point, and he wasn't sidetracked by any of the extracurricular, just be frankly, BS that comes along with the training cycles and everything else. He was 100% focused on training for us to go to war, and that was his focus. So.
And you deployed with him in 2017?
Yes.
And have you continued a relationship with him after that deployment?
Not really.
When was the last time that you interacted with Chief Gallagher?
Today?
Prior to today, when was the last time you interacted with Chief Gallagher?
I met him with my attorney and his attorney, I don't know the exact date, probably in the last 2 or 3 months.
Okay. Any other times that you'd met with him since after the start of this case?
Since after the start of the case, I think there was one other meeting with our attorneys, and that was it.
Okay. I want to draw your attention now to the deployment in 2017. Where were you deployed?
In Mosul.
Okay.
Iraq.
What was Mosul, Iraq? Sorry. And what was your mission there?
My mission was to advise, assist, and support the Iraqi forces as they sieged the city of Mosul.
And what was your role in the platoon?
I was a platoon medic, and I was one of the senior E6s. So as a platoon medic, I worked with SO1 Burn to make sure that department was ready to go at all times. And then as one of the senior E6s, I helped in other ways keep the platoon moving.
And with regard to your professional relationship on deployment, what was your relationship with Chief Gallagher then?
We had a good relationship on deployment.
And was he the LCPO for your platoon?
Yes, he was.
I'm going to draw you directly to the incident with the ISIS prisoner, okay?
Okay.
Do you recall that incident?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What's the first thing that you recall about that day?
I was in a vehicle and there was some sort of commotion. I can't remember if it was radio traffic or watching people convene to the other side of the building. For whatever reason, I went over there. On my way there, somebody told me to grab my med bag. I went back, got my med bag, went over to where the ISIS fighter was.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you there for just a sec. Where were you operating when that happened? You were in your vehicle. Do you remember what time of day it was?
I do not remember.
Okay. What was your job on that morning?
That morning, I was in a vehicle, and I was in one of the vehicles that was on an overwatch on security.
Okay. And then you said you might have heard something over radio chatter. Do you remember what that was?
No, I do not.
Okay. And you said after you had heard something over the radio chatter, and actually, sorry, would anything help refresh your recollection with regard to what you had heard over the radio chatter?
It's possible.
Would your previous statement that you given to NCIS possibly help refresh your
Possibly.
recollection? Okay. Your Honor, permission to approach?
May.
Go ahead and just review the center portion there. And then look up when you're done. Please don't describe anything that you're reading. So, Scott, has that refreshed your recollection with regard to what you heard over the radio chatter?
No, it does not.
You still don't remember?
No.
Okay. So after you'd heard whatever you'd heard over the radio chatter, what did you do next?
And I don't remember if it was radio chatter or some other commotion. Just want that to be clear. I went over to the back side of that building where the ISIS fighter was.
Okay. And what was the scene as you approached?
As I approached, there were people around the ISIS fighter treating him. He was on his back, his left flank was exposed to me. So as I walked up, I could see his left side. There were treatments being done, so I approached, went up to the head that was already, or the patient's head. There was already 2 other medics on the scene, so I don't believe in too many cooks in the kitchen.
Who are the 2 other medics on the scene?
Chief Gallagher and SO1 Burn.
And what treatments had you witnessed as you walked up?
I don't remember what treatments had been done when I got there or what was done after I got there.
Just a moment, please, Your Honor.
You may.
We're looking at a transcript from your interview with NCIS. Help refresh your recollection with regard to this point of what treatments had been completed?
It's possible.
Your Honor, permission to approach.
You may.
Go ahead and review the entire page.
All right.
So once that, has that refreshed your recollection as to the state of the treatments that have been done at the point in which you approached?
Not really.
What was the state of the prisoner when you got
He
to him?
was unconscious.
And what else did you notice about him besides the fact that he was unconscious?
He was unconscious. I know he had a wound on his leg, had a bandage on it. He possibly had wounds on his chest. I don't fully remember. And he was completely sedated, and he was breathing normally with a pulse.
Okay. And what did you do in particular once you got there?
Once I got there, since the other medics had the scene under control, I took a position near the patient's head, and then I monitored his breathing.
How did you monitor his breathing?
I would hold my thumb near the top of his mouth, and then once he had a cric, hold it over the top of the cric and feel the breaths.
Okay. So a cric was performed, and what is a cric, just for the members?
A cric is a tube placed into the cricothyroid membrane that allows the patient to keep their airway open.
And so how did you monitor the cric specifically for the breathing?
Once the cric was in place, I would either feel for breaths coming out, or I would watch for misting at the base of the tube.
And I might have missed it. How would you describe the breathing of the patient at that time?
The breathing was very normal, shallow rhythm, exactly what you would expect from somebody in a deep sleep.
And with regard to the pulse, how did you check the pulse of the prisoner?
Checking his wrist and his carotid artery.
And can you, for the members, can you please direct where the carotid artery is? And the witness has pointed his two fingers towards the right side of his upper neck. SO1, what, if anything, happened next?
Next, I know SO1 burn left for a time. Don't know exactly when. And then at some point, Chief Gallagher pulled out his knife and stabbed the ISIS fighter right underneath the collarbone.
And how many times did he stab the ISIS fighter?
I don't remember.
If you were able to review your transcript where you described how many times he stabbed the ISIS fighter, would that help refresh your recollection?
It's possible.
Your Honor, just a moment, please. Your Honor, permission to approach?
You may.
Hold on. Am I reading the whole page or just parts of it?
Read the
Hold on
orange.
just a second. Defense, do you have an objection?
I do. Just trying to find
Were you able to review the
Hold
portion?
on just a second. Is there an
I thought
objection?
we were in an objection.
Hold on, everyone,
Sorry.
please.
Sorry, sir.
Is there an objection?
Yes, Judge, there is.
Basis of the objection?
That he's trying to show him an earlier statement as opposed to the later statement where he corrected this one.
All right. Well, the parties are allowed to refresh recollection with it, whatever the witness believes might assist in their refreshing. So the objection is overruled. Go ahead, Government.
Will you just go ahead and review the highlighted orange portion of the page in front of you and look up and when you're done reviewing it? Someone has that refresh your recollection?
No.
Would reviewing the statement that you made in October to this point refresh your recollection?
Possible.
Your Honor, permission to approach?
May?
Just go ahead and read the top portion there and up there you got those. Someone Scott has that refresh your recollection?
No, it is not.
So, again, how many times do you believe that Chief Gallagher stabbed the prisoner?
I know he stabbed him one time. Anything else would be speculation after that. I don't remember for a fact if he stabbed him again.
At least one time.
Yes.
What happened next, if anything?
After that, Chief Gallagher grabbed his med bag and left the scene.
And I'm sorry, I skipped a couple questions. When you saw him stab him, can you please show for the members the direction of the knife in which and how in which he stabbed him?
So, behind the collarbone, parallel with the head, down right here. Is that clear?
Yes, the witness is pointing towards his top part of his neck, next to his collarbone, and a direction down towards his torso.
I believe it was straight down and not angled, and to be precise as I remember it.
Understood. What was your reaction to this?
I was startled and I froze up for a little bit.
What did you do next?
What I do next, I stayed at the scene until the ISIS fighter asphyxiated.
So when you say the ISIS fighter asphyxiated, do you mean that the ISIS fighter was still alive after the stabbing occurred?
Yes,
And about how long after the stabbing occurred did the ISIS fighter die?
I don't remember.
Did the ISIS fighter at any time wake up prior to the stabbing?
No, I did not.
So did he make any movements towards anyone?
No.
Can you think of any medical reason why the stabbing might have occurred?
I do not.
Just a moment, please, Your Honor. In our showing to the witness and publishing for the members what's been previously admitted as Prosecution Exhibit 8, Members, is that up on your screen? SO1, is that up on your screen?
Yes, it is.
SO1, I want to direct your attention to the right side of the neck of the patient. Was the bandaging you see there, was that present when you first arrived and were monitoring the patient's vital signs?
No.
Does that bandaging cover the area which you saw SOC Gallagher stab the prisoner?
Yes.
Is it possible that you yourself provided the bandaging to the prisoner's neck?
It's possible, but I don't remember.
For the court, I'm taking down prosecution exhibit 8. How far were you away from the stabbing when it occurred?
Probably a foot and a half.
After you'd stayed with the patient and monitored him until he died, what did you do next?
After the ISIS fighter was deceased, I grabbed my belongings, would have been my med bag, and I left the scene.
What's the next thing you recall?
Next thing I recall, I know at some point we did Chief Gallagher's reenlistment, and I know we did a lot of waiting around at the scene while we were waiting to get word from the talk on whether we were staying, moving to another position, or returning to the camp.
So I want to back up to that reenlistment. Where was the body during the reenlistment?
It was near the group where the reenlistment was done. I don't remember specifically.
What was your reaction to the reenlistment?
Hold on just a second. Members, can I have a few minutes? If you'd return to your deliberation room, I'd appreciate it.
All right.
Everyone, please be seated. Government, what's the relevance of the re-enlistment ceremony?
The relevance of the reenlistment ceremony goes directly to premeditation as far as the overall reenlistment ceremony.
Is it the government's theory that the stabbing occurred so that he would have a proper re-enlistment?
Negative.
And what's the relevance to premeditation?
Premeditation, sir, doesn't.
How does an act occurring after the event relate to premeditation?
So the case law is clear, sir, that premeditation can be proven by acts that occur after the event.
So how does the re-enlistment ceremony relate to premeditation?
It relates to the pride that he took in the fact that he had completed the murder and that he had actually stabbed the prisoner. So,
all right. Well, I'm sua sponte, not going to allow you questions from any of the witnesses as to how they felt about the re-enlistment ceremony. That question may be appropriate as to the photographs as it relates to the Article 134 terminal element.
understood.
But the re-enlistment is not a charge on the charge sheet. Also, the government has not published 4, it has not published 7, it has not published 13. It had not published 8 when you published it. Let's make a note of those that you haven't published and make sure that you have permission to publish.
Yes, sir, my apologies. Can I get that list again?
Yes,
4, 7, 13.
4, 7, and 13. So
Yes,
let's just make sure we get permission before we call it. All right, any questions on this, government?
No, sir.
All right, defense, any questions?
No, Judge.
All right, would you ask the members to join us?
not East Coast.
How do we get that late? The clock in the back of the room, yes, right.
All right.
Everyone, please be seated. You may continue.
Yes, sir. SO1 Scott, do you remember any photos being taken that day?
I know a photo was taken during the re-enlistment ceremony.
Do you remember if you were present in that photo?
Yes.
After you had left the compound, do you recall a meeting with the E6s that occurred?
I know after we came back to the compound, I had a brief conversation with SO1 Miller, and I don't specifically remember what was said.
I'm not sorry. I want to stop you there. I'm not asking specifically what was
Okay.
said. Did Chief Gallagher ever come upon any meetings that you were having with regard to what had happened that day?
There was one
Objection.
meeting.
Basis?
Facts, not evidence, meetings regarding what had happened that day.
All right. Overruled. I'll allow the witness to clarify.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Did Chief Gallagher ever come upon a meeting that was occurring that day with regard to?
Objection to the characterization of what the meeting was in regard to.
All right. Overruled. Let's get the question out so the witness can then indicate whether any of these things happened, and then we'll have our answer.
Did Chief Gallagher ever come upon a meeting that was discussing what had happened that day at the compound?
Yes.
And did Chief Gallagher make any statements to you at that time?
I briefly talked to him. He asked what the meeting was about. I said, in general, the guys aren't okay with what happened today. And he wanted to know specifically who. And I told him that I wasn't going to name names, and just that, in general, the platoon wasn't okay with that.
After deployment, did you ever have any interactions with Chief Gallagher with regards to any of the actions that he had committed on deployment?
I had interactions with him. There was, got to put some basis behind it. There was a lot of drama in the last couple months of deployment, and then upon returning home, and a lot of drama with people saying things about Chief Gallagher to others. So he was trying to figure out where it was coming from. So there was a point where I was walking into our high bay at SEAL Team 7. He saw me, so we had a brief conversation about.
What specifically did he say to you during that brief conversation?
I don't remember specifically, but I remember the basis of the conversation.
If you were able to review the text messages that you sent after that conversation, your teammates, would that possibly help refresh your recollection as to what specifically he said?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach.
You may.
Just go ahead and review the whole page, please.
Okay.
So, when you're done. Does that help refresh your recollection as to what Chief Gallagher said to you?
Yes.
Retrieve the document. What did Chief Gallagher say to you in that high bay?
In the high bay, he was trying to figure out what was being said, who was saying it, why it was being said, like for natural reasons. I suggested that to bring everybody into the high bay and just talk it out. And I know at the end of the conversation, he was frustrated and he muttered something about killing people.
And you passed that on to your teammates, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you thought that that was a serious threat at the time you passed it on to your teammates?
No.
Your Honor, permission at this point to treat the witness as hostile? I just want to impeach with regard to what he texted his teammates.
Just because he doesn't like the answer doesn't mean it's hostile.
Designating someone as hostile has no effect. If you feel like you want to impeach the witness, you may impeach the witness following
Yes, sir.
the rules of impeachment.
Yes, sir.
We're not on TV, it's just the court.
You said to your teammates, not sure how to handle him, but he is ready to fight or kill people, so we need to have this talk with leadership. Did you say that to your teammates?
Yes, I did.
Then again, you said to your teammates, but he is down to kill people, and I wouldn't put it past him.
Yes, I said that.
Then again, you said to your teammates, he was talking about fighting people, then mentioned he'd be down to kill someone as well.
Yes.
You said all of that to your teammates in the days following that conversation.
Yes.
Did Chief Gallagher ever make any comments to you regarding shooting women or children while you were on deployment?
Is this the same question as before?
Correct.
Was that without the members here?
Correct.
Okay. He had made comments that might insinuate that he's okay with it, but he never made comments to me about specifically doing it on deployment.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Cross?
Yes. You didn't think Chief Gallagher was serious about killing members of the platoon, did you?
No.
How long have you been in the Navy?
10 years now?
Have you ever met a chief that didn't threaten to kill members of his platoon in jest?
No.
If you had thought that was a serious threat, you would have reported it, right?
Yes.
Now, let's talk about your first deployment. You mentioned that there was very little combat on the first deployment, right?
Yes.
Was that at the beginning of the deployment?
I showed up to re-enlist about 2 weeks before the rest of the platoon, and during that 2 weeks, just to put in perspective, we were in a VSP site, so we were up on a shelf overlooking a river valley in Helmand Province, and during that 2 weeks, there was a large attack from the Taliban on the Afghan checkpoints that they had there. So we were removed and supporting with air power and different small arms weapons that we had from our position on the shelf. That was before the rest of the platoon arrived.
And was the rest of the deployment relatively uneventful?
Yes.
So this happened before Craig Miller showed up?
Yes.
Dylan DeLay?
Yes.
Dalton Tolbert?
Yes.
You spent that whole first deployment with those three, right?
Yes.
Was there ever any combat with those three?
It was very little.
You said that during the unit level training that Chief Gallagher was very focused on preparing for war. Is that right?
Yes.
He was very driven.
Yes.
Did certain members of the platoon not like that?
Yes.
Craig Miller,
Yes.
Dalton Tolbert,
Yes.
Dylan DeLay.
Yes.
Did they make clear before you even deployed that they didn't like Chief Gallagher?
Yes.
Did that hatred of Chief Gallagher continue throughout the deployment?
Yes.
Did they take opportunities to tell other people in the platoon how much they didn't like Chief Gallagher?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about this ISIS fighter. How many times have you been interviewed by the government on this?
Probably 5 or 6.
And I apologize. That's with the prosecutors or NCIS or both?
That's between both of them.
Okay. How many times did you meet with the prosecutors?
Probably 4 or 5.
Did you tell them the story the same as you told it here today?
Yes.
Using the same words?
As far as I could remember, yes.
Okay. You talked about, you say you saw the Chief Gallagher stab this individual. You never saw any blood, did you?
No.
There wasn't any blood on his knife, was there?
No.
Fighter didn't react?
No.
You didn't see any movement?
No.
Any indication that withdrawn? You're a medic, right?
Yes.
Special Operations Combat Medic?
Yes.
Of course, 18 Delta? That
Not
involves,
18 Delta. Special Operations Combat Medic. It's 2 separate calls, just to be precise.
okay, it's pretty extensive training, right?
Yes.
You're very well versed in medicine, aren't you?
Yes.
You used an interesting word. You said you watched him until he asphyxiated.
Yes.
Asphyxiated is a combat medic. That means somebody who is deprived of oxygen, doesn't it?
Yes.
Why'd you use that word?
That was what killed him.
You didn't say that Chief Gallagher suffocated him, did you?
No.
Craig Miller suffocate him?
No.
Did you suffocate him?
Yes.
How?
After Chief Gallagher left the scene, I was left there monitoring him. I thought he would die. He was continuing to breathe normally, as he had been before. So I held my thumb over his ET tube until he stopped breathing.
Have you told them that he asphyxiated?
Told him that he'd be asphyxiated.
Did they ever ask you the follow-up question of how?
No.
Did NCIS ever ask you this question?
No.
Has anybody ever asked? Not getting into any communication with your attorney. Am I the first person outside of your legal team to ever ask you this question?
Mr. McCasey did during one of the interviews that we had.
And at that time, you didn't fully answer it, did you?
I invoked my right to remain silent.
Okay. But now, after being instructed by the judge to tell the truth,
Yes.
there's never any spurting blood, was there?
No.
You talked about a meeting afterwards, and when you told Chief Gallagher about, they aren't okay with what happened. You weren't detailed about that. Did you tell him that the platoon wasn't okay with him killing this terrorist?
No.
Did you ever discuss what happened means?
No, I did not.
After this, did you listen to members of the platoon? Well, withdrawn. Did anybody talk about turning Chief Gallagher in for a murder during the deployment?
No.
When did you first hear that?
Would have been the beginning of 2018.
When did you return from deployment?
I returned August of 2017.
And who was driving the idea of having Chief Gallagher reported for murder?
That was Chief Miller, or SO1 Miller at the time.
Who else?
I don't specifically remember who else.
Was Dalton Tolbert involved?
No,
Dylan DeLay?
I don't remember.
Josh Renz?
Yes.
Josh Renz wasn't even there that day, was he?
No. I don't think so.
So you told NCIS that he asphyxiated, you told the prosecutors that he asphyxiated, you told this jury on direct that he asphyxiated. Nobody ever asked you a single follow-up question on that?
No.
Did Chief Gallagher kill this terrorist?
No.
Why?
Why didn't he?
No, why did you kill him?
Because I knew he was going to die anyways. And I wanted to save him from waking up to whatever was going to happen next to him.
What does that mean?
Well, to back up a little bit, I know there's some people believe that he would have been treated fairly by the Iraqis. He would have been taken
Objection,
in, taken care of.
speculation.
All right, members, I'll need just a couple of minutes if you return to the deliberation room. I appreciate it. Everyone, please be seated. Mr. Scott, would you just step out into the hallway for just a second?
Your Honor.
So I'm not particularly concerned about the speculation part. I'm more just sort of questioning the relevancy of the why question under the circumstances. Why is it important to the offenses or a defense as to the why?
Because he said that he was going to die anyway, and I want to make sure that he was going to die anyway had nothing to do with Chief Gallagher.
Well, won't that be decided by, or won't that be elucidated by, I assume, expert testimony for the remainder of the trial?
No, it won't.
Right.
Your Honor, it's
So I guess my point then is that his answer may be non-responsive then to the point of your question.
I can ask more direct
Okay.
questions.
All right. I think he's answering the why morally when you're really sort of asking the why physically. So, all right. Yeah, if you just lead him a little bit so that we can get to the point that you're trying to get at. All right. Would you ask for Mr. Scott to return, please? Mr. Scott, would you please return to the witness stand? Are we ready to recall the members?
Yes, Judge.
Would you ask the members, please?
All right.
Everyone, please be seated. Members, we've resolved the matter without the court either sustaining or overruling the objection. Defense, you may proceed.
You stated before the members left that he was going to die anyway. There was no medevac coming for this.
No.
He was going to be, if he had woken up, he was going to be turned over to the ERD troops, correct?
Yes.
In fact, when I say turned over, was he ever actually in our custody, or was he technically an ERD prisoner the entire time?
Technically, they're prisoners.
And have you ever seen how the ERD treats prisoners in the past?
Yes.
Have you ever seen them detain, try, and then release a prisoner?
No.
Have you seen them torture, rape, and murder prisoners?
Yes.
Have you listened to this?
Yes.
objection, relevance.
Overruled.
Is this why you asphyxiated?
Yes.
weren't concerned that the ISIS prisoner may die because of anything Chief Gallagher did, were you?
Say that again.
You weren't concerned that he would have any effects from anything Chief Gallagher did to him, were you?
No.
You were only worried about him being tortured and killed by the ERD.
Yes.
No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, sir. Esselman Scott, as defense counsel previously said, you had spoken with NCIS or myself approximately 5 to 6 times. Is that correct?
Yes.
And never once in any of those 5 to 6 statements prior to testifying here where you have a grant of testimonial immunity, did you ever mention anything about putting your hand over the Crike tube, did you?
No.
And you never actually told NCIS that he asphyxiated in your original statement, did you?
No, I either said he stopped breathing. I know one of the statements I said he asphyxiated.
What you actually said was, and then I kind of like stayed with the dude's head and then like for a few minutes until he died.
Yes.
And multiple times you were asked what happened next after the stabbing, and you never mentioned that you had covered the tube in any way, did you?
No.
In October, again, you actually sat down with me. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I asked you multiple times what happened after Chief Gallagher had stabbed the prisoner. Did I not?
Yes.
And never once did you mention in that October meeting that he had asphyxiated or that you had covered his tube, did you?
I don't remember the exact language that I used in
Well,
that meeting.
in fact, what you said was, after Gallagher stabbed the individual, Scott believed that there was nothing medically he could have done for these injuries. So he stayed next to the prisoner until he stopped breathing.
Yes.
So until he stopped breathing, you never said in any way that you were the one who made him stop breathing.
No, I didn't say that.
And then again, we met in January, and I asked you the same type of follow-up questions with regard to what happened after the prisoner was stabbed, and you never mentioned that you had covered the prisoner's tube, did you?
No.
And again, you had said that you monitored the patient's vital signs, and you monitored his breathing until he stopped breathing.
Yes.
Then again in May, we met. Just a moment, please, Your Honor. In May, we met, and you were even more specific. You said he was breathing after he was stabbed. You said that, correct?
Yes.
And he stayed there until there were no more breaths coming out of the tube. That's what you said, right?
Yes.
So when you told Mr. Parlatore that no one had ever asked you any follow-up questions with regard to whether or not how he stopped breathing, that's not entirely accurate, is it?
I think it's accurate.
Every single time that I had sat down with you, or that NCIS had sat down with you, or that anyone had sat down with you about this case, they asked you what had happened after he had stabbed the prisoner, correct?
Yes.
And only now, when you have your grant of testimonial immunity and you understand from advice of your counsel that you cannot be prosecuted for anything that you say on this stand, are you going to stand up and say that you were the one who killed the prisoner?
Hold on just a second.
Mischaracterization. He's been told that he can be
I
prosecuted for
understand.
perjury.
Objection is sustained.
That you cannot be prosecuted for killing the ISIS prisoner. You understand that you have testimony immunity for that, for any statement that you say right now you cannot be prosecuted for anything other than perjury. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you can stand up there and you can lie.
Objection. Argumentative.
Overruled.
You can lie about how the fact that you killed the ISIS prisoner because you don't want Chief Gallagher to go to jail.
No, if I lied, I would lose my grant of testimonial immunity.
But you'd never be prosecuted for what you're now saying that you've done. That's what you understand.
Yes.
You don't want Chief Gallagher to go to jail, do you?
I don't want him to go to jail.
You actually allowed your attorney to make a statement that you wanted him to be acquitted.
Yes.
And so now you've come up and you've told this story about how you stopped the prisoner from breathing that you had not told any one person until a couple weeks ago, correct?
Say that again.
That you not told anyone beyond your counsel potentially, and I don't want to get into that statement, You had not told any single person until today, correct?
Aside from my counsel, I've never told anybody until today.
Okay. Just a moment, please, sir. You testified that you were concerned about what was going to happen to the prisoner after he woke up.
Yes,
You're a medic with a lot of experience, correct?
yes,
And you had just witnessed that Chief Gallagher had stabbed the prisoner 2 to 3 times in the neck. Is that correct?
Objection. Mischaracterization. He said he,
Overruled. I'll allow the witness to clarify.
I know he stabbed him once. Outside of that, I would be speculating, and I don't believe Chief Gallagher deserves that.
So, but when you spoke with NCIS the first time, you said 2 to 3 times. Is that correct?
That's what was in the statement, and that's correct, but I'm...
You had an
details.
You had an opportunity to review it, didn't you?
Yes,
And you saw that it said 2 to 3 times, correct?
yes,
And then when you spoke with me in October, you said 2 to 3 times, correct?
yes,
Okay. And then when we spoke in January, you still said 2 to 3 times, correct?
I don't know.
And now we're at 1 time. So, in your medical experience, do you believe that an individual who is stabbed with a fixed blade knife directly to the neck 2 to 3 times,
Objection.
as you described it,
objection. Mischaracterization. He did not say he was stabbed in the neck.
All right.
What's it?
Overruled. We'll allow the witness to clarify.
do
Go ahead,
you
go.
believe that that person would survive that stab?
The stabbing I saw, yes, he would survive.
You understand you had had conversations with your platoon multiple times about reporting this, correct?
Yes,
And at any time, did you guys ever discuss lying about what had occurred?
no,
Okay. And at no point did you tell the rest of your teammates, the ones that you knew would have to come up here and testify potentially in this case, did you tell them, no, Chief Gallagher didn't actually kill them, I'm the one that killed the prisoner?
I did not say that.
You didn't say that to anyone.
If I'm gonna be frank, that would have been really stupid.
Because the only time that you have ever said that to anyone that matters, to any official, is now when you're testifying under a granted testimony immunity, correct?
Yes,
I have no further questions, sir.
How many times
Hold
did
on,
you...
hold on,
Sorry.
hold on. Let me in. All right. Cross,
Yes, please.
thank you.
How many times did you tell Lieutenant John that the prisoner asphyxiated?
I know at least once.
How many times did Lieutenant John ask you, what do you mean he asphyxiated? I thought he died from a stabbing.
Never,
How many times did Lieutenant John ask you to explain what you meant by asphyxiation?
did not.
How many times did anybody from the government ask you what was the cause of death?
Nobody asked me.
In all this time of investigating a murder, nobody ever asked you what the cause of death was?
No,
Who was the first person to ask you what's the cause of death, outside of your attorney?
believe Mark McCasey,
And what did you say to him?
that he asphyxiated.
You were asked about the early statements to NCIS. You didn't have a grant of immunity at that time, did you?
No,
Did you think it was a good idea to tell NCIS, hey, without immunity, I did it?
no,
Was there a motivation to not tell them the full truth?
yes,
Okay. Now that you have the immunity, now you're able to tell the truth.
yes,
Are you telling the truth here today?
yes,
You say that you don't want Chief Gallagher to go to jail. You were just asked about that. Is that because you don't want an innocent man to go to jail?
that, and I believe I've always gotten along with Chief Gallagher. He's got a wife and a family. I don't believe he should be spending his life in prison.
When he asked you about whether the platoon got together to discuss making up stories, is Craig Miller telling the truth about what he said?
Objection,
Can you say that
speculation.
again?
I'll rephrase. I'll withdraw and rephrase. Was Craig Miller there to view these incidents?
I don't know.
You said it would have been pretty stupid to let the rest of the platoon know, hey, I did it, right?
Yes.
Was it after you got your grant of immunity that you started telling the prosecutors that he asphyxiated?
I would have to look on the timelines of those statements.
Did the prosecutors even react when you said asphyxiated?
No.
Because they heard what they wanted to hear.
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
No further questions.
Redirect.
No, sir.
Members, are there any questions for this witness? Negative responsible member of the government, is this witness subject to recall?
Yes, sir.
Petitioner Scott, you were temporarily excused. During the course of this trial, you're directed not to discuss your testimony with anyone other than the counsel in this room. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down for now. Thank you.